The first gunman had Elias Mercer by the collar before anyone in the Silver Basin Saloon understood that this was not a robbery. The second locked the front doors. The third pointed his revolver toward the crowded supper tables. And Clara Bell saw the fourth man slip quietly toward the kitchen. "Sit down," the leader said. No one moved. He shoved Elias backward against the bar hard enough to rattle the glasses. Elias was 38, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, and dressed better than most men who came through Silver Basin. His dark coat had cost more than Clara and her mother earned in a month. He did not reach for the revolver under his coat. That surprised her. 5 men had entered, all armed, all watching Elias. Not one had asked for money. Clara stood behind the serving counter with a wooden tray in her hands. Her mother, Martha, was beside the kitchen door carrying a bowl of stew. The leader looked over the room. "Everybody stays where they are. We aren't here for your watches." A ranch hand near the stove slowly lowered his hands. The gunman tightened his grip on Elias. "We need Mr. Mercer to settle a business matter." Elias looked at him. "If Silas Rourke wants to speak to me, he can do it himself." The room grew quieter. The leader smiled. "He will." Clara's fingers tightened around the tray. Silas Rourke. She knew the name. Everyone within 50 miles knew it. Rourke bought struggling cattle outfits cheaply, combined them, then squeezed neighboring ranchers until they sold too. Clara had never met him. She already disliked him. The leader pulled a folded sheet from his coat. "You will tell these people you're surrendering control of Mercer Spring." Several ranchers looked up sharply. Elias did not. "No." The man struck him across the mouth with the back of his hand. Martha shifted beside Clara. Clara touched her mother's wrist. "Not yet." The leader held the paper nearer Elias's face. "You will agree before witnesses." "I said no." Clara studied Elias. She had disliked him for years without knowing him well enough to dislike the sound of his voice. The Mercer name had been spoken in her mother's house whenever old debts were mentioned, whenever drought was mentioned, whenever Martha looked toward the west pasture they no longer owned. Clara had grown up believing wealthy ranchers protected wealthy ranchers. Men like Elias Mercer could lose one pasture and still sleep beneath a good roof. Her mother had lost everything, except a few possessions, and the stubborn habit of getting up each morning. Clara had never forgiven the difference. The leader pushed Elias into a chair. "Midnight will make you reasonable." Clara looked toward the wall clock. 7:20. Then she looked toward the kitchen. The fourth gunman had reached the doorway. He leaned against it as if he had chosen the spot casually. He had not. He was blocking the back exit. Clara lowered the tray. One of the gunmen noticed. "You, stay put." Clara gave him a flat look. "My stew is burning." A few men glanced at her. The gunman laughed. "Then let it burn." Martha spoke quietly. "She's right. Kitchen catches, whole building goes." The gunman near the door turned his head. That was all Clara needed. She picked up the large enamel water pitcher. "I'll take it off the stove." The leader stared at her. 2 minutes. Clara walked into the kitchen. She did not hurry. The gunman followed and stopped inside the doorway. The kitchen was narrow and hot. 2 cast-iron stoves worked against the brick wall. Steam clouded one window. Grease darkened the beams above the work table. Clara set down the pitcher. The gunman watched her. "Quick." She moved toward the wash kettle. It sat on an iron stand near the old dumbwaiter. The dumbwaiter had not carried food upstairs in years. The second-floor rooms had been closed long before Clara began working here. But the rope still ran through the wall. The counterweight still hung inside the shaft. And the service hatch beside it opened into the old delivery space beneath the building. Clara knew because she had crawled through it twice to fix broken kitchen pipes. She glanced at the gunman. He was watching the saloon, not her. Clara gripped the kettle handle with a folded cloth. She lifted, then deliberately let one side strike the stove. The kettle tipped. Hot wash water spread across the kitchen floor. The gunman jumped backward. "What are you doing?" Clara kicked the wooden catch beneath the dumbwaiter. The counterweight dropped. The old pulley screamed. A heavy wooden platform shot upward inside the wall and struck the top of the shaft with a crash that shook dust from the ceiling. The gunman spun around. 2 others rushed toward the kitchen. Clara moved the other way. She slipped through the side opening into the narrow service corridor behind the bar. Elias saw her. For 1 second, neither moved. Then Clara pointed toward the floor hatch. Down. His brows pulled together. Where? Unless you prefer the chair. That decided him. Another crash came from the kitchen. 1 gunman shouted that someone had gone upstairs. Clara dropped to her knees and pulled up the square hatch hidden beneath a flour sack. Cold cellar air touched her face. A ladder disappeared into darkness. Elias crouched beside her. What about everyone else? Clara looked toward the saloon. The gunman had left only 2 men covering the room. They're safer if you're gone. His eyes stayed on Martha. Clara noticed. My mother can handle herself. That isn't what I asked. It's the answer you're getting. Footsteps came closer. Clara grabbed Elias's sleeve. Move. He went down first. Clara followed and lowered the hatch over them. Darkness swallowed the cellar. For several seconds, they heard only their own boots touching the stone floor. Then Clara heard Elias breathing beside her. Not fast, not panicked. Above them, boots crossed the boards. A voice shouted from the kitchen. She's gone. Another answered. Mercer too. Clara rubbed flour from her fingertips against her skirt. Elias noticed the motion even in the faint light leaking through the floor cracks. You planned that quickly. I work here. That explains the tunnel? It explains knowing where things are. He looked toward the ceiling. You could have stayed out of this. Clara turned to him. I still might regret not doing that. For the first time, the corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Then a voice above them stopped both of them. Rourke said Mercer stays alive. Another man answered. Until when? A floorboard creaked directly overhead. Clara and Elias stood still. The reply came clearly through the crack. Midnight. After that, the agreement's no good anyway. Clara looked at Elias. His expression had changed. Not fear. Recognition. She whispered. What happens at midnight? Elias looked toward the dark passage leading beneath the saloon. That depends on whether we can get out of here before they find us. Clara waited until the boots above them moved away. Then she turned toward Elias. What happens at midnight? He did not answer at once. The cellar smelled of damp stone, old hops, and wood that had been wet too many winters. Faint lamplight slipped through gaps in the floorboards above, cutting pale lines across his coat. Finally, Elias said, Rourke loses his chance. To do what? To make Mercer Spring his. Clara stared at him. You own the spring. I control it. That sounds like the same thing. It isn't. A chair scraped across the saloon floor overhead. Clara raised one finger. They listened. A gunman crossed toward the kitchen, then another voice called him back. Only when the footsteps faded did Clara move deeper into the cellar. Talk while we walk. Elias followed. Rows of empty beer barrels stood against the stone walls. Clara passed them without touching anything. At the far end, an old timber partition leaned inward. Behind it was the delivery passage. She pulled aside a warped plank. Elias looked into the narrow black opening. You expect me to fit through there? I expect you to decide whether you prefer narrow spaces or 5 armed men. He took off his coat. That answers it. Clara almost smiled. Almost. He rolled his shirt sleeves to his elbows and stepped into the passage. She noticed the movement. A man wearing an expensive vest should not have looked so accustomed to work. That irritated her more than it should have. Clara followed. The passage had once connected the saloon cellar to the stockyard behind the building. Beer, flour, and salted meat had been hauled through it before the newer loading shed was built. Now it held dust, broken crates, and forgotten lumber. Elias whispered, How far? Maybe 60 feet. Maybe? I don't carry a measuring chain while serving stew. He nodded. Fair. They moved sideways through the narrow space. Above them, muffled voices passed through the boards. Then came a louder one. Search the cellar. Clara stopped. Elias looked back. They know. They suspect. A door slammed somewhere behind them. Clara pointed ahead. Faster. They reached a low timber brace where the passage narrowed. Clara ducked beneath it. Elias followed. The wood gave a sharp crack. He froze. So much for quiet. Keep moving. The next crack was louder. Clara turned. A rotten support shifted. Elias. He looked up. Move. The brace collapsed. Elias threw one arm around Clara and pulled her forward. Boards, dirt, and broken stone fell behind them. The passage filled with dust. For several seconds, Clara could see nothing. She coughed into her sleeve. Elias still had one hand on her upper arm. She pulled away. I was moving. The roof disagreed. I did not ask you to drag me. No. He brushed dust from his hair. You're welcome anyway. Clara gave him a look. Then she turned toward the fallen debris. The passage behind them was blocked. Not completely, but enough. Elias crouched beside the collapse. We can clear it. We shouldn't. My coat is back there. You're worried about your coat? I liked that coat. Clara stared at him. Then he smiled properly. It was quick, unexpected. Clara looked away first. You're not what I thought. His expression changed. What did you think? A man who would complain about losing a coat. That seems specific. It's only the beginning. She moved toward the wall ahead. The passage continued. A floor vent overhead let more sound through now. Voices. One belonged to the gunman from the saloon. The other was new. Slow. Controlled. Clara crouched. Elias lowered himself beside her. The new voice said, You had one job. We had Mercer in the chair. And now? He disappeared through the kitchen. Silence followed. Then the new man spoke again. You have until midnight. Clara looked at Elias. Silas Rourke. She had never heard him before. She knew it anyway. The voice carried the confidence of a man accustomed to giving orders that other people paid for. Rourke continued. The livestock inspector leaves on the freight wagon before dawn. Mercer reaches him. This arrangement dies. One of the gunmen said, Then we kill Mercer. No. Rourke's answer came sharply. Dead men do not surrender water rights. Clara leaned closer to the vent. He only has to say yes in front of witnesses. Rourke continued. After midnight, my claim expires. Until then, Mercer stays alive. Elias closed his eyes briefly. Clara whispered, What claim? He motioned for her to wait. Above them, Rourke paced. His pocket watch clicked shut. Find the girl too. A gunman laughed. The cook's daughter? She knows this building. The laughter stopped. Clara glanced at Elias. He whispered, He learns quickly. So do I. Rourke moved away. The voices faded. Clara remained crouched beneath the vent. You were going to tell me eventually. Yes. When? When we weren't underneath men trying to find us. Convenient. Elias leaned against the wall. Rourke has been buying ranches east of here. Mercer Spring feeds the lower channels. I know where it feeds. Yes. His tone changed slightly. Clara heard it. He wants the spring because the smaller ranches depend on it, she said. He wants the ranchers dependent on him. And you stopped him. I refused to sell. Clara brushed dust from her fingers. That doesn't explain my mother. Elias said nothing. Clara looked directly at him. The Bell place went dry. I know. The Mercer gates were closed. I know that too. My mother lost cattle, then the land. His face tightened. That happened before I controlled the ranch. But you were a Mercer. Yes. That mattered to us. I know. Clara turned away. She did not want him agreeing with her. She wanted him defensive, arrogant, something easier. Instead, he said, "After my father died, I opened the lower gates." Clara looked back. "What? Every drought since. You expect me to believe that?" "No." He pointed toward the boards above them. "Listen to what happens outside instead." Clara frowned. 3 ranches south of Mercer should have gone dry last summer, Elias said. They didn't. She remembered. Martha had talked about it. Everyone had expected the lower troughs to fail. They had not. Clara had assumed spring runoff lasted longer than expected. Elias continued. "Rourke knows if he owns the spring, those ranches either sell to him or pay whatever he demands." Clara looked toward the darkness ahead. For years, she had sorted men into simple groups. Those with power, those without it. It had been useful. Simple things usually were. Now Elias was making simplicity difficult. A shout sounded above them. "Check the stockyard." Clara stood. "We need to move." Elias pushed off the wall. "You should go back to your mother." Clara stopped. "You don't know the way out." "I can find it." "No, you can't. You've done enough. That is not your decision." He held her gaze, then nodded once. No argument. No command. Something inside Clara shifted by a fraction. She pointed toward the narrow passage. "The old exit comes up behind the stock pens." And then, Clara thought of Rourke's pocket watch. The inspector. The freight wagon. Midnight. Then we stop running. Elias watched her. Clara wiped the last dust from her fingers. "We get you to that inspector before midnight." Above them, Rourke shouted another order. Clara stepped into the darkness. This time Elias followed without questioning the direction. The old loading passage narrowed until Clara had to turn sideways. Cold night air slipped through cracks ahead. They were close to the stockyard. Clara could smell damp earth and cedar rails now instead of beer and cellar dust. Behind them, men moved through the saloon. A chair scraped. Someone shouted. Then Clara heard her mother's voice. "Take your hands off me." Clara stopped. Elias nearly walked into her. "What is it?" She raised one hand. Another voice came through the boards overhead. "Bring the cook out here." Clara's shoulders stiffened. A gunman answered. "Rourke said the girl comes back if we use her mother." Elias looked at Clara. She was already turning around. "No," he whispered. Clara faced him. "That is my mother, and there are armed men between you and her. She is there because of me. She is there because of Rourke." Clara stepped past him. Elias caught the wall, blocking the narrow passage with his arm. She looked at it, then at him. "Move. If you go back through that cellar alone, they get you too." "I didn't ask permission." "No." His voice stayed quiet. "But I'm not standing here while you walk into 5 guns." Clara's eyes narrowed. "You told me the inspector leaves before dawn." "He does." "Then go." Elias did not move. "You know the exit now." "I know enough." "Then go. And leave your mother behind?" Clara said nothing. That answer mattered more than she wanted it to. Above them, Martha spoke again. "I've been threatened by better men than you." A gunman cursed. Something struck the kitchen wall. Clara flinched toward the sound. Elias lowered his arm. "We changed the plan." She looked at him. "You said reaching the inspector was the only way to stop Rourke." "It still is." "Then why are you standing here?" "Because I can't protect 5 ranches by proving I'm willing to sacrifice the people in this room." Clara stared at him. For years, she had imagined wealthy men making choices from comfortable rooms. Who lost water? Who kept land? Who survived another winter? She had never imagined one of them standing in a collapsing tunnel, giving up his cleanest escape for a cook who owned almost nothing. Elias pointed upward. "How many doors between the kitchen and storeroom?" 2. "Locks?" "1 latch. 1 bolt. Anything else?" Clara looked toward the darkness behind them. The dumbwaiter. Then the answer came. "There's a bell." Elias frowned. The old dumbwaiter has a service bell. Kitchen pulls once, upstairs pulls twice. Still works? Sometimes. That sounds promising. It sounds unreliable. Those are not always different things. Clara looked at him. There it was again. That small shift in his mouth. Wrong time for it. Still, she almost answered with one. They crawled back toward the cellar. At the collapsed section, Elias pulled loose 2 boards, while Clara squeezed through the gap. This time, when he offered his hand, she took it. Neither commented. They reached the cellar wall beneath the kitchen. Voices passed overhead. Rourke's was the clearest. Mercer hears her mother begging. He comes back. Martha answered before anyone else could. You'll wait a long while. Clara pressed her lips together. Elias whispered, She sounds like you. She would say I sound like her. Clara found the dumbwaiter rope along the wall. A thin second cord ran beside it. The bell. She pulled once. A faint metal ring sounded above. Footsteps stopped. A gunman said, What was that? Clara waited, then pulled twice. Ring. Ring. Another voice came from the saloon. Upstairs. Exactly what she wanted. One man crossed the kitchen. Another followed. Rourke snapped. Check it. Their boots climbed the stairway. Clara looked at Elias. 2 gone. 3 left. 1 is Rourke. That still counts. She pointed toward the cellar stairs. At the top sat the old delivery door. Beyond it was the kitchen storeroom. Clara climbed first. She lifted the latch slowly. The door opened half an inch. Martha stood near the flour bins, with 3 patrons beside her. 1 gunman guarded them. Another watched the saloon doorway. Rourke was nowhere in sight. Clara lowered the door. Elias leaned close. Can they barricade the storeroom? If they get inside. How? Clara looked toward the service shelf. A stack of empty crockery sat above the dumbwaiter hatch. She smiled without meaning to. Elias noticed. That worries me. It should. She pulled the main dumbwaiter rope hard. The counterweight rose. The platform dropped inside the wall. Then Clara released it. The platform slammed downward. The entire kitchen wall shook. Crockery crashed from the shelf. Both gunmen turned. Martha did not. She looked straight toward the delivery door. Clara opened it. Now. Martha moved immediately. She shoved the nearest patron toward the storeroom. The others followed. 1 gunman spun around. Elias came through the door behind Clara and drove his shoulder into a hanging rack. Iron pans crashed between them. The gunman stumbled backward. Martha reached the storeroom. Clara grabbed the door. Inside. Her mother caught her wrist. You? I'm going. With him? Clara looked at Elias. He was holding the kitchen door shut while 1 gunman pushed from the other side. Yes. Martha's eyes moved between them. Then she nodded. No questions. No blessing. Just trust. Go. Clara shoved the storeroom door closed. The bolt dropped from inside. Elias released the kitchen door. Time. They ran. Back through the delivery hatch. Down the cellar steps. Into the passage. The gunmen followed seconds later. Clara heard them striking the cellar door. The delay would not last long. They moved faster now. At the far end, Clara found the old stockyard panel. She lifted the wooden bar. Cold air rushed in. Outside stood cedar fencing, dark pens, and the elevated water tank. A windmill chain clicked steadily in the night. Elias stepped through. Clara followed. They crouched behind a rail. For the first time since the attack began, the sky was above them. Elias looked toward the road beyond the stockyard. If we cross the north gate, the inspector's boarding house is 10 minutes away. Clara nodded. Then she saw the lower trough. Water dripped steadily from the pipe. She stared at it. Elias noticed. What? That line comes from Mercer Spring. Yes. It stayed wet last summer. Yes. Clara turned toward him. My mother's leased pasture is beyond that ridge. I know. You kept water running there. He looked toward the trough. I kept it running everywhere I could. After your father closed the gates on us? Elias was silent for a moment. Then he said, I fought him over it. Clara's face hardened. You expect that to fix what happened? No. His answer came quickly. My father controlled the ranch then. He believed water should belong to whoever could afford to hold it. And you? I believed thirsty cattle don't care whose name is on the gate. Clara looked at him. When did you open it again? The week I took control. Why didn't you tell my mother? Because reopening the channel was easier than asking her to trust another Mercer. The windmill chain clicked again. Clara looked away. For years, she had blamed Elias because his name had been easier to hold than the past itself. She could not undo what his father had done. Neither could he. But Elias had spent years quietly doing the one thing his father had refused to do, keeping the water moving. A lantern appeared beyond the north gate. Then another. Clara lowered herself behind the fence. Elias followed. Silas Rourke stepped into the stockyard. He closed his pocket watch. 4 gunmen spread out behind him. One covered the north gate. Another moved toward the loading lane. The others took positions beside the pens. Rourke looked directly toward the shadows where Clara and Elias crouched. You took the long way, Mercer. Elias slowly stood. Clara rose beside him. Rourke smiled. Behind him, every path toward the inspector was blocked, and midnight was getting closer. Silas Rourke stood beneath the stockyard lantern, with one hand resting near his coat pocket. 4 gunmen spread across the gates behind him. The 5th man appeared at the passage Clara and Elias had just used. They were boxed in. Rourke looked at Elias. You have made this harder than it needed to be. Elias stepped slightly in front of Clara. She touched his sleeve. Don't. He looked at her. If this goes badly. It already has. Rourke smiled. There she is, the cook's daughter. Clara said nothing. Rourke pulled out his pocket watch. 11:43. He snapped it shut. 17 minutes, Mercer. Elias looked toward the north gate. The gunman there raised his revolver. Rourke continued. You surrender control of Mercer Spring. You say it clearly in front of my men. Then you walk away. And the other ranchers? Elias asked. They make their own arrangements. With you. Business has winners. Elias glanced at Clara. And losers? Rourke shrugged. Usually. Clara watched the stockyard instead of Rourke. The elevated tank stood above the loading lane. A maintenance rope ran down one cedar post. She had seen stock hands use it during summer repairs. Pull the rope. Lift the sluice. Drain the tank into the wash channel. Rourke's men were standing almost directly beneath it. Clara looked at the dirt. Dry on the surface. Hard beneath. But if several hundred gallons crossed it quickly, the narrow lane would become mud. Rourke moved closer. One last offer. He pointed toward Clara. Sign the spring away, and she walks out with her mother untouched. Elias did not even look at Clara this time. No. Rourke's mouth flattened. You are willing to risk her life for water? No. Elias rolled his shirt sleeves higher. I'm willing to stop you from owning everyone who needs it. Clara looked at his sleeves. That familiar movement. Work before words. She shifted half a step toward the maintenance post. Rourke noticed. Stay there. Clara stopped. One of the gunmen laughed. What was she going to do? Clara looked at him. Nothing clever. The man grinned. Good. Rourke checked his watch again. That was when Clara understood something. He kept looking at time, not people, not the fences, not the tank. He saw pressure only where he had created it. She met Elias's eyes, then looked once toward the rope. His gaze followed for less than a second. He understood. No discussion, no argument. Clara moved first. She grabbed a loose shovel leaning against the rail and threw it across the lane. It hit the opposite fence with a hard crack. Two gunmen turned. Elias lunged toward the nearest gate. Rourke shouted, "Stop him!" Clara reached the maintenance rope. She pulled. Nothing happened. The old line held stiff. A gunman rushed toward her. She wrapped both hands around the rope and pulled again. The wooden sluice above groaned, then released. Water exploded from the bottom of the tank. It struck the loading lane in a heavy sheet. The first gunman lost his footing. Another jumped back and collided with the fence. Water rushed around boots, posts, and wagon ruts. The packed dirt turned dark, then soft. Rourke tried to cross toward Elias. His boots sank ankle deep. He stumbled. Elias slammed the north gate shut. The gunman guarding it became trapped on the wrong side. From the saloon direction came a shout. Then another. Clara turned. Martha Bell emerged from the rear yard with 3 saloon patrons behind her. 2 stock hands came from the opposite pens. They carried rope and long handling poles. No one fired. They did not need to. The water had broken the gunmen's formation. The gates did the rest. One man dropped his revolver when a stock hand pinned his gun arm against the cedar fence with a pole. Another tried climbing the rail and slipped back into the mud. Elias reached him first. He kicked the revolver away and forced the man face down. Clara saw Rourke moving toward the side gate. She ran. He grabbed the latch. Clara caught the opposite rail and slammed the gate closed before he cleared it. Rourke turned. His coat was soaked below the knees. For the first time that night, he looked uncertain. "You think this settles anything?" Clara glanced toward his pocket. The watch chain hung loose. No. She looked toward the road beyond him. But midnight will. Elias approached. Rourke looked at him. "You still need the inspector." Elias nodded. "Yes." Rourke smiled again. "You won't make it." A bell rang in town. 1:45. Clara opened the side gate. "Then we should stop talking." Elias looked toward Martha. "You all right?" Martha brushed dirt from her apron. "I've had worse evenings." Clara almost laughed. Elias turned to the stock hands. "Hold them here for the sheriff." One man nodded. Rourke shouted after him, "You leave me with hired hands?" Elias did not look back. "People you underestimated seem to be giving you trouble tonight." Clara and Elias ran. They crossed the stockyard and took the north road. The livestock inspector was staying above the feed warehouse near the freight stop. 10 minutes on foot, maybe less. They made it in 7. The inspector was downstairs tightening straps on his travel trunk when Elias pushed through the door. The man stared at his muddy clothes. "Mercer, I need you to hear this before midnight." The inspector looked at the wall clock. 11:57. Elias rested both hands on the counter. "Mercer Spring remains under my control. Every existing downstream ranch keeps access under the same terms. I am surrendering nothing to Silas Rourke." The inspector studied him. "Is someone trying to force a transfer?" "Yes." "Then I'll record your refusal." No envelope appeared. No hidden paper saved them. The important thing was that Elias had arrived while Rourke's coercion still had a deadline. The clock moved to midnight. Clara watched the minute hand pass 12. That was all. Rourke's leverage was gone. 3 weeks later, the Silver Basin stockyard smelled of fresh cedar. Clara knelt beside the communal trough holding a hammer. Elias stood opposite her, with a replacement board pressed against the frame. "Straight? Your end is high. My end is exactly where you told me. That explains the problem." He lowered it slightly. Clara checked the edge. "Better." Martha sat near the pump, peeling apples. The Bell family had not accepted charity. Instead, Martha had agreed to lease grazing land into a shared arrangement, while Mercer Spring supplied water at a fixed rate every rancher could afford. Clear terms. No favors. No ownership of anyone. Clara raised the hammer. Elias kept the board steady. She drove the final nail. Then she sat back and looked at the repaired trough. Beside them, Martha's dented brass cup hung from the pump handle. Elias reached toward it. Clara lifted an eyebrow. You planning to use my mother's cup? I was considering it. Ask her. Martha did not look up from the apple. You can use it, Elias. Clara shook her head. He smiled. Then he pumped cold water into the cup and handed it to Clara first. She took it. This time, she did not refuse what was offered. If you enjoyed watching Clara and Elias earn their trust the hard way, subscribe and leave a like for more Wild West stories like this one.